So anyway, thank you, Pastor Bland, and God bless you this morning. I'm just extremely excited to be here this morning. I'm excited because I want to say this as a precursor to us going into the lesson. You all know that over the past 4 years, I was acting as president for my chapter, my sororities chapter down in Mariana, and you all suffered along with me. But I want you to know yesterday was my last meeting as president. So I'm so grateful and I'm so thankful that God allowed me to just work through that and see it through. So thank you for praying for me during that time. And so I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to the beach to celebrate. Yes, I am. Turn with me, please, to 2 Chronicles, the 30th chapter. 2 Chronicles, the 30th chapter. Okay. So, do you have another one up there, Jackie? Can you take that one down? That's not the correct one. There should be one on the desktop that says May 7th. But if not, we're going to keep on moving. In 2 Chronicles last Sunday, we began to talk about Hezekiah. And we talked about how Hezekiah was a godly king. His father was Ahaz. Ahaz was a wicked king. As a matter of fact, he was one of the most wicked. And then Hezekiah was one of the most godly. And sometimes you wonder how things like that happen. You know, sometimes we even look around in families a lot of time, and we see where you have kind of like a bad apple, we call them like that, and then you look at the parents and you say, I don't know how that child came out of that household. He got such good parents, or she has such good parents. But you know, sometimes that just happens. And so Hezekiah, God blessed him, and Judah needed a good king at this time. They needed a better example than the one Ahaz left them. Ahaz was sacrificing his own children in the fire, just to let you know how bad he was. And so when Hezekiah came on the scene, he had to turn some things around. And so he brought in revival and reform. And like I said, they needed it at that time. So one thing that he did was he brought back the Passover. And so tell me again where the Passover is from. Why was the Passover instituted? Somebody? Okay, all right. Okay. Who says that? In Egypt. But okay, what happened to cause the Passover? What happened? What was the one plague that caused the Passover to occur? Exactly right. Okay, so the plague was the death of the firstborn son, right? And so God instructed Moses to tell the people, then this is what you do. The death angel is coming to Egypt. But if you want your child to be spared, then you take the blood and you put the blood over the doorpost and the lintel. And when I see the blood, I'll pass over. And so it was a national holiday, or national feast, if you will. And it was one that all Jews were expected to celebrate, and they were to come to Jerusalem to celebrate that. So since the days of Solomon, there had not been a Passover. So that lets you know how far they were removed from let me say this, involving the whole nation. So that lets you know how far removed they were from doing what God had instructed them to do. And so when Hezekiah came on the scene, remember now, this is a split nation. The nation is split. You have the northern kingdom and you have the southern kingdom. And so what he wanted to do was bring the nation together with this Passover. So you have them split politically, because you know the reason they were divided was because they had civil war. And so they were split politically. He wanted to bring them together spiritually. So you remember now that the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes in the north were under the rule of Assyria. And remember now that those people, those few Jews who remained there, were worshiping the gods of the Gentile nations. And so this is a good time. This is a good time to make a new beginning. How many of you know anything about new beginnings? How many of you like to start over sometimes? Have you ever messed something up and you said, you wish you had a do-over? You wish you had a do-over? Sometimes you wish that with your children, don't you? And not new children, but you wish you had a do-over with the way you instructed them on some things. And the way, even you look at some of your finances sometimes. I do that sometimes when I find it. If I had just done this, if I could have a do-over, I would make more investments. If I had a do-over, I would buy more property, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And so this was a good time for a do-over. Good time for a do-over. Another opportunity, and God always opens the doors for opportunities. That's called grace. That's called mercy. And so he opens the door for them to make a fresh start, Come on, let's come together and let's glorify the Lord. Okay, so in 2 Chronicles, the 30th chapter, let's look at verse 8, 2 Chronicles 30 and verse 8.
But Deborah, would you say that, okay, that was back then, that they needed another chance in order to get it right and everything. But do you think that the believer never needs a fresh start?
Not a fresh start. I mean, every day is a start for a believer. But God sees us the same. God sees us the same. And so, yes, they needed a fresh start because they were, as we are going to see here, they were stiff-necked. They were hard-hearted. But Hezekiah pleaded with them and said, don't be that way. Don't be that way. He says, now, in verse 8, now be ye not stiff-necked as your fathers were, but yield yourselves unto the Lord. How many of you know that one of the hardest things to do is to yield yourself to someone else or to someone else's a way of thinking or to someone else's way of doing things? It's a hard thing to do. Those of you who are married, you should know that. You're living in a house with another person, you're only related to that person by marriage and not related to that person by blood. So you really don't think alike. Some of those, you don't do things the same way, though there has to be a meshing or coming together. So sometimes you have to yield yourselves to their way of thinking. They have to yield themselves to your way of thinking, and that's not always easy. It's a hard thing to do. It says, but yield yourselves unto the Lord and enter into his sanctuary, which he has sanctified forever, and serve the Lord your God, that the fierceness of his wrath may turn away from you. Well, we know it was hard for them to yield to God, which it seemed like it should have been one of the easiest things for them to do because of all that God had done for them, how God had watched over them. But even so, even God had instructed them in the law. This is what you yield yourself. But it was hard for them to do. And so in the 9th verse it says, for if ye turn again unto the Lord, your brethren and your children shall find compassion before them that lead them captive, so that they shall come again into this land. For the Lord your God is what? Gracious and merciful, and will not turn away his face from you, if ye return unto him. If ye return unto him. But as I say then, sadly, most of the people outside Judah rejected. They rejected the invitation. In verse 10 it says, but they laughed them to scorn, and they mocked them. Here's another opportunity for you to come together, The Lord has had compassion on you. The Lord has had mercy on you. Here's another opportunity for you to come together. You come together with everybody, and you participate in the Passover, but then they mocked and laughed at him. And so when that happens, it's just like when God said, look, don't worry about it. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. And so God had a blessing for him. Not something for you to turn your back and walk away to the blessings of the Lord. So God had a blessing for him. God said, if you return unto me. Now, if somebody told me they had $1,000 waiting for me outside there in the parking lot, if you walk through the door and come to the parking lot. Now, you know I just break down the door, don't you? Because I'm on my way to the beach. I need all the money I can get. So if all it took for me is to open the door, go out to the parking lot. Well, what is it in us sometimes that say, well, you know, they need to come in here to me. If they want me to have it, they need to come to me. What is that? Selfishness, pride, stubbornness, stiff-necked. That's foolish. Now that is foolishness.
And I think some of the same things that you see going on today. The people that's turning away, don't want to even come even to the message of grace. You know, and they want to have it their way. And so now I consider it
That's absolutely what they are. Brother Davis has made a very valid point concerning the message of grace. Hey, Mother, you look lovely this morning. It is such a simple message. Not that it was simply done, because we know Jesus going to the cross was a hard thing. But it's a simple message. You trust in what he did on the cross. You believe in what he did on the cross. But people are so stubborn, so prideful, that they rather think that it's something I can do in addition to what he did on the cross. That is. And so then they reject the message of grace. We see it every day. Don't you see that every day? Every day people reject the message of grace, and then they look at you like you're crazy.
Sister Teacher,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you find it hard to believe. Now, I'm going to say that for myself at first. And I remember Betty Miller telling us that, and I just kept saying, no, it's something else I got to do. You don't know what I done did. And she said, it doesn't matter what you done did. And she would always say, it doesn't matter what you done did, it's what Jesus did.
Yes.
But you know, I just found that so because you would leave her on Thursdays and you hear this message. Then I go back to True Vine and I hear all what I gotta do and what I haven't did, and yeah. And it just kept me like in prison. Well, if I die today, I kept everything okay today, so I go to heaven. Then tomorrow I get up and do something wrong. I'm going.
And we, yeah.
It was just like that.
It was torturous.
For years.
Yes.
For years.
Yes.
And when I started coming over here, and you know, and I stopped. Now that's another thing. You can't just be here and there, because you're still gonna be confused. You got to, and then you got to get in there and start studying. And now a lot of things I heard at other churches, I disagree with them. I told her, I said no, and it was always a confusion. Here she comes. She dog with the she argue with the preacher. No, I'm not. I'm just saying what the word said. Well, it doesn't mean that. Okay, well, whatever. But here, when I just asked God, if this, and you know, you just said, God, I just want you to give me the peace.
Yes.
I want peace in my mind.
Yes.
I want peace in my spirit to know that I don't have to do nothing. All this little stuff I'm trying to keep and not do, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's what Jesus did.
Yes.
Do you believe? Hallelujah.
All right.
Do you believe what he did? What he did on the cross when he came in, is that sufficient? Yeah. Yeah, it
All
is.
right,
It
all
is.
right. That's a blessing. That's what so many of us live like that. And as I said, it's torturous to
Yes.
think that every time you lay down at night, you you got to like, forgive me, Lord, forgive me, Lord, forgive me, Lord.
He also said he'll forgive you 70 times 7.
He did say that.
And even after that, he will, and after he forgive you 70 times 7, then that's when you're ready to forgive you for all of that.
Well,
Every time in the day.
well, you know what? Exactly. So that's exactly like it is the message of grace. It's simply Mother put it, just believe what he did and not in what you did. And so Hezekiah was trying to bring them together. They had the Passover. Now they celebrated it in the second month. And we know that according to Exodus, the 12th chapter, it's really supposed to be done in the first month. But if you recall, when he came into office, they had to get the temple and everything together. Levites had to sanctify themselves because they weren't in any shape to perform any kind of ministerial duties, and so they had to be sanctified. They had to clean up the temple from where it was just just degraded from when Ahaz was the king, and so it took them, remember, 16 days to get all of that in order. So during the first month, they spent all of that time cleaning up everything that was messed up and sanctifying themselves so they would be in some shape to have the Passover. And so they came together and agreed that it would be done, as a provision in the law says that it could be. So they came together, and the Passover was actually done here in the second month. And that celebration is described in 2 Chronicles, the 30th chapter, and the 13th through the 27th verse. So now it's a happy occasion. You come together. You haven't had this Passover of this magnitude since Solomon was king, and so it is an extremely happy occasion. And so look at 2 Chronicles, the 30th chapter, and look at the 22nd verse. So happy, in fact, that they decided to continue the celebration. They got in there, look, they had revival, and they wanted that revival. You ever been like that when you were going to revival? They said, this revival is so hot, we're going to carry on another week.
Yeah.
We're going to carry on that. So that's what they did. That's what they did. It says, and Hezekiah spake comfortably unto all the Levites that taught the good knowledge of the Lord. And they did eat throughout the feast 7 days, offering peace offerings and making confession to the Lord God of their fathers. And the whole assembly took counsel to keep other 7 days. And they kept other 7 days with gladness. They were glad to stay there and glad to do what they had to do, but in order to do that, they needed more sacrifices. And so Hezekiah offered up sacrifices out of his own property. Hezekiah, king of Judah, did give to the congregation 1,000 bullocks and 7,000 sheep. I want you to know that he was the richest king of Judah. He had it to give. He had it to give. And so the princes gave to the congregation 1,000 bullocks and 10,000 sheep, and a great number of priests sanctified themselves. And all the congregation of Judah with the priests and the Levites and all the congregation that came out of Israel and the strangers that came out of the land of Israel and that dwelt in Judah rejoiced. Amen. So there was great joy. Great joy, great joy, great joy. It's something to have great joy down in your soul, isn't it? Great joy. You can only have great joy, though, with the surety that Jesus is who he is and God is who he is. That's the only way you can have great joy. Great joy. And so when the feast ended in that second week, they left for home. The priest pronounced the benediction. And benediction, look over in Numbers, the 6th chapter. You hear this a lot when you hear people giving a benediction. In Numbers, the 6th chapter, the 22nd through the 27th verse. 6:22. Okay, are you there? It says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto Aaron and to his sons, saying, on this wise ye shall bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, the Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. So now turn with me, if you will, over to 2 Kings, the 18th chapter. We'll come back to 2 Chronicles, but let's go back to 2 Kings, the 18th chapter. So you remember Ahaz, Hezekiah's father, and you remember that Israel or Judah rather had been a vassal state, and remember, vassal just means that they were subjected to another a state or nation bigger than them, and they had to pay tribute to them. So they could stay where they were, but then they were told what to do. Okay, so that's kind of almost like a form of slavery. You can stay where you are, but then, when I come, you got to do what I tell you to do. When I come for my money, you got to give me my money. And so when Ahaz, Hezekiah's father, when Sargon, ruler of Assyria, died in battle and Sennacherib took the throne, then Hezekiah was feeling himself. So Hezekiah said, well, this is a good time to break that yoke that was on us since my father's days. And so look at 2 Kings 18, verse 7. 2 Kings 18, verse 7 says, and the Lord was with him, with Hezekiah, and he prospered whithersoever he went forth. But look at the B part of that verse. It says, and he rebelled against the king of Assyria and served him not. Okay, so this, like I said, he thought this was a good time, so you change leadership over in Assyria. So Hezekiah is saying, all right, change leadership. This is a good time for me not to do what, to get away from up under that pressure, get away from up under that yoke. So he decided not to pay them the annual tribute that they were due. And so, see, he was feeling a little strong because Judah had victory over the Philistines. So he was feeling a little strong. So Sennacherib had invaded Judah and headed toward Jerusalem. Okay, so you have the fenced cities around in Judah. And so they really had taken all of those, and Jerusalem was left to be taken. So if you read, when you look at it, Sennacherib invades Judah, and they start talking to Hezekiah and letting him know that, look, I don't know what you're doing. They kind of scared Hezekiah. He was feeling himself at one time, but when they really came in to get him, he was like, I probably spoke too soon. And the Rabshakeh came and said, look, you're putting your trust where you don't need to put your trust. Who would Israel run to when they always wanted help?
All right.
Who would they run to? Egypt. They would run to Egypt. They would run to Egypt. So go to Isaiah, the 30th chapter. So Hezekiah ran to Egypt. He was forming an alliance with Egypt. Hezekiah says, Isaiah says in chapter 30, he says, woe to the rebellious children, I'm in verse 1, woe to the rebellious children, saith the Lord, that take counsel, but not of me, and that cover with a covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin, that walk to go down into Egypt, and have not asked at my mouth to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. Therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame,
My Lord.
and the trust in the shadow of Egypt your confusion. Go back to 2 Kings. Okay, so you're running to Egypt. Even the Rabshakeh say you're running to something that's a bruised reed.
My Lord.
Egypt is a bruised reed because, see, you know, they were powerful at one time, but now they're not as powerful as they used to be. And you know what? That's kind of us a lot of times. We think we run into somebody that has the power, but really not as powerful as we think they are. Not as powerful as we think they are. And so God says here through the prophet, then how can you go to Egypt? You're going to a covering that's not really even a covering.
All right.
When I'm the one now, a covering, let me tell you what a covering is. A covering is when you coming through the wilderness and you got fire at night and you got a cloud in the daytime.
Yes.
That's a covering. Somebody who can feed you when you're hungry. All you got to do is say, I'm hungry.
My Lord.
And the food rains down from heaven. And then when that's not enough, all you got to do is, I'm tired of eating this. I want some meat.
All right.
And send meat, that's a covering. Someone who can allow you to cross over the Red Sea on dry land, where your shoes don't even get muddy. And then you walk for 40 years and your clothes don't even get tattered. That's a covering.
Take your time.
But you running down to Egypt, somebody that can't help you. They just people just like you.
Take your time.
They're just people just like you.
That's it.
And so you ought to get tired of spinning your wheels running to Egypt, because you see, you just adding sin to sin.
My Lord.
You're adding sin to sin. And Egypt can only do what I allow them to do. Egypt can only do what I allow them to do. And so the Rabshakeh actually was kind of made fun of them and said, you know, you need to think about it, and you need to just come on and serve. You need to just come on and serve Assyria.
Amen.
You need to just come on, and you just need to stop doing what you're doing. And so they're scared Hezekiah, And so, you know, he was weak, and, you know, he ended up paying the tribute. Look. Hezekiah in verse 14, 2 Kings 18, in verse 14. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria to Lachish, saying, I have offended. Return from me. That which thou puttest on me will I bear. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Now that's a lot of money. And Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found where? In the house of the Lord, and in the treasure of the king's house. So you remember how his father Ahaz had done really the same thing, how they had come to get their tribute, and he had gone and he had broken off the instruments in the house of the Lord to pay that tribute. And so we get to a point then, look over at chapter 19 in 2 Kings. It came to pass when King Hezekiah heard it, that he rent his clothes, where you know, the Rabshakeh has come and said, you know, you might as well come and serve over in Assyria. You know, you might as well do it because it's inevitable. It's going to happen anyway. When King Hezekiah heard it, that he rent his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth and went into the house of the Lord. Now. What? That's what we do. It's an afterthought. It's an afterthought. And so Hezekiah prays, and he prays, and God sends a message to him through the prophet. And it says, and he sent Eliakim, which was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and the elders of the priests, covered with sackcloth, to Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz. And they said unto him, Thus said Hezekiah, This day is a day of trouble, and of rebuke and blasphemy, for the children are come to the birth, and there is not strength to bring forth. It may be the Lord thy God will hear all the words of Rabshakeh, whom the king of Assyria his master has sent to reproach the living God, and will reprove the words which the Lord thy God hath heard. Wherefore lift up thy prayer for the remnant that are left. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah, and Isaiah said unto them, Thus shall ye say to your master, Thus said the Lord, Be not afraid of the words which thou hast heard. I'm going to tell you something. There's nothing like having the assurity of a word from the Lord. That's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. There is nothing like it. And all I can do is go back to when you got trouble. And y'all, we got trouble. Everybody does. We have trouble on varying degrees. For some of us, it's our children. For some of us, it's our finances. For some of us, it's our job. For some of us, it's all of the above. And it's just trouble on top of trouble on top of trouble. But I tell you, when you got trouble, but you got a word from the Lord, it doesn't matter what the trouble is. Tell you, you can go to bed and wake up, the trouble's still there, but you got a word from the Lord. And all it takes is one word. One word from the Lord. Isn't that all it took when he was on the ship? Yes. And he got up, everybody else was all flustered and concerned about the weather. And all he got up and said one word, and the one word was peace. And he can speak the same one word in your life. I tell you what, a whirlwind of trouble in your mind. All he got to do, mother, is say peace, peace, peace. Or just a small whisper that comes to you and said, no, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about that. I got it. I got it. And you don't have to worry about it. You know what? I know you want to pick up a weapon and fight in this battle. I know you do, but you don't have to worry about it because the battle is mine. The battle is mine. I'm fighting this one for you. You don't have to worry about it. He will do it. He has never, look, I'm going to tell you something. God is not a man that he should lie. He's not. God doesn't have to lie. If he said he would do it, he will do it. Oh, he's done it so many times.
The only way God won't is you try to help him.
What will he do when you try to help him? What will he do?
Just say, okay, I'll let you help.
And we've seen that even when we're talking about Israel. We've seen him do that. Okay.
Yes. But I tell you one thing. You probably never almost got to shouting in a courtroom. But when he told me that Thursday, I said, don't worry. Don't worry about it. Peace. And I just kept on trying to worry about it. But it just got, hallelujah.
All right.
It got so strong, Casey, don't worry about it. Don't worry. Peace. That Monday when I went to court, God showed me that Saturday night, showed me the courtroom. And when I got in court, I sit down, my feet start falling at me. But when that judge got through, woman, I tell you, that God ain't a God all
You
by
better
himself.
say that. You better say that.
I had to go outside because I didn't want the judge to think I was crazy.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I tell you, God is a lawyer.
Yeah. Yes, he is. Yes, he
I
is.
used to hear the old people said it, didn't know what he meant. But I've learned through these 74 years
Hey.
that God is a lawyer in a courtroom. God is food when you're hungry. God is, woman, I'm going home. Because I'm going to disturb y'all.
No, you can't go home,
I'm gonna
mother.
disturb y'all.
Pray
But
now.
I
Come on.
tell you don't know God, what
Hey,
God done did for
thank
my
you.
family.
Thank you.
I don't mean to disturb.
I really don't know what he's done for yours, but I know what he's done for mine. And so I give him the glory this morning. I know what he's done for mine. And I want you to know, I know it was nobody but the Lord. I know it was nothing that I did, nobody that I knew, no resources that I had, I know it had to be the Lord.
He said, no other help.
No other help I know. Yes, Lord. Yes,
But
Lord.
he said, trust me.
Yes,
All
yes,
I want you to do is trust me. You
yes,
get that you can't do nothing else but trust me.
yes.
And then you can tell somebody else that God will.
He will.
That's when I
He
tell
will.
Pastor, God will.
He will do it.
He don't know God.
He
like I
will.
do.
He
God
will. And so there's nothing like having a word from the Lord. The word from the Lord brings assurance. Y'all, and that's why it's important to read the word.
Yes.
That's why it's important to read the word. That's why it's important to have a word in your heart. Because when he's speaking, he's just speaking back his word. He's speaking back his word. Yes, I will. And so Hezekiah needed some assurance. So he sent to the prophet, right? You know, he finally sent to the prophet. The prophet had a word for him, and the prophet said to him, "Look, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
God's got this. God got this."
All in-
Look at 2 Kings, the 19th chapter. Look at 2 Kings, the 19th chapter. I just love how when the pressure gets so heavy on us, Curtis, we'll call on him.
Yes.
Won't we do it?
Yes.
Won't we do it?
Yes.
And sometimes the pressure has to get that hard.
Yes.
Kirk Franklin says some of us didn't have trouble, we wouldn't pray. You know what I'm talking about? God just, waiting. I'm waiting on you. I'm waiting on you. And so Hezekiah, he said, he received the letter, I'm in verse 14, he received the letter of the hand of the messengers and read it, and Hezekiah went up into the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord.
Yes.
And Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, "Oh Lord, God of Israel." Look, now he talking to God, telling God who he is and telling God where he live and everything. We'll do that too. We'll start telling God all about himself. God, you the God that my grandmother talked about. We go all the way back, won't we? And say, "Which dwelleth between the cherubim, thou art the God, even thou alone. Of all the kingdoms of the earth, thou hast made heaven and earth.
Yes.
Lord, bow down thine ear and hear. Open, Lord, thine eyes and see. And hear the words of Sennacherib, which has sent him to reproach the living God. Of a truth, Lord, the kings of Assyria have destroyed the nations and their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire, for they were no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they have destroyed them. Now, therefore, O Lord, our God, I beseech thee, save thou us out of his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that thou art the Lord God,
Amen.
even thou only." And so again, it's nothing like a word from the Lord. It's nothing like having the assurance that God heard you when you prayed.
Amen.
Nothing like having that assurance. And I'm so glad when Hezekiah, he's talking about the gods of the nations. He said, they're gods, but they're not really gods because they're just a work of men's hands. And so then, you can talk to them all you want to, but they can't talk back.
No.
You can pray to them all you want to, but they can't answer prayer. And so he's praying to the God of Israel, and now he's getting the assurance from the prophet. Look at that same chapter, and let's look at verse 32. "Therefore, thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into this city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before it with shield, nor cast a bank against it. By the way that he came, by the same shall he return, and shall not come into this city, said the Lord.
Take your time.
For who is I?
God.
I will defend this city to save it for mine own sake." Now, you got to step back when God's getting ready to work for his own sake. when he gets ready to do something for his own sake, oh my God, the victory is already there.
Yes.
The victory is already there. And for my servant David's sake. So we go all the way back, and I'm going back to when God says something, he means it. When God says something, he means it. So we go all the way back to that covenant that he made with David, that he wasn't just talking idly with David. When he said, look, I'm going to do this for you.
Yes.
You don't ever have to worry, because this covenant is going to last forever. It's going to last forever. And so when he said that, he meant that. He says, oh, I'm doing it not only for my sake, but I'm doing it for David's sake. And it came to pass that night
All right.
that the angel of the Lord went out and smote in the camp of the Assyrians
All right.
185,000. What is that? 185,000?
Yes.
185,000 that they didn't lift up a hand,
All right.
because God said, you don't have to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, and I'm not really doing it for you, but I'm doing it for my sake and for my servant David. And so the angel of the Lord went out throughout the camp, 185,000. They rose early in the morning. Behold, they were all dead corpses. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went and returned and dwelt at Nineveh. And it came to pass, as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch, his god, that Aramelech and Shazrazah, his son, smote him with the sword. And they escaped into the land of Armenia, and Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his stead.
Amen and amen.
A very good lesson. I tell you what, I just, tears in my eyes. The thought just came to my mind that, you know, there's no way to know God until you don't have nothing. And no wonder it was that Jesus, he didn't say war unto the poor people, but he said war unto the rich people. James said it too, about the rich. And then he said, you know, it's easier for a camel to go through eye of a needle than a rich man to enter in. Because the seed is there, but no seed. And that's the reason the prophet said, break up the fallow ground. Your heart got to be broken up.
Yes.
As long as we got two nickels to rub together.
Jesus, you know, and Pastor, you were talking, you got to be willing to risk, because that is going to involve a lot of embarrassment. It's going to involve a lot of embarrassment. You got to be willing, like I said, if someone's out there in that parking lot with your blessing in their hand, but you got to be stripped down. You got to, you know, you got to be ridiculed in order for you to break open the door to get it. You got to set that pride aside.
My Lord.
You got to set that pride aside. You got to be willing to risk the embarrassment. And y'all, it's just going to come in buckets. But what are you willing, how much are you willing to do? You know, some of us, you know, we want to be embarrassed just a little bit. I was telling somebody yesterday, you know, I don't like to fall. Now, I guess anybody in their right mind, you know, you just don't like to fall. You know, you're walking along, you trip and you fall down, you know what I'm saying? That's one to embarrass, you know what I'm saying? Little Jay has a hoverboard. He was home the last time, and I'm trying to ride the hoverboard. You know, because I want to be a cool grandma. So I'm trying to ride the hoverboard. But Tara, I rode the hoverboard through the house, over the threshold of one of the doors. I fell into the den. Just a real, there wasn't no cute fall. It was like a real ugly fall. But you got to be willing to take some falls. You know, if you want the blessings of the Lord,
All right.
if you want what God has for you, you got to be willing to be stripped down. You got to be willing to be embarrassed.
You know, the thought just came to me, some of us just look too good to be any good.
You dropped the mic on that one. You dropped the mic. Anybody else? Anybody? What you feel about that, Mother Helen?
I feel like that you be embarrassed,
think so. Go ahead.
I also think that I don't see nothing that's more important than you, you're talking about just giving up on everything and missing out on your salvation or your eternal life. Any sacrifice, I don't think it's a sacrifice, I mean, that's, whatever sacrifice you have to go through. There's nothing out there that important that you should
Amen.
take a chance on losing your salvation or losing eternal life.
So, Pastor Blaine, you had something? Okay. So I think we're kind of coming to a close, so this is a good time. If you have something to share, if you want to share, add something to this lesson, this is a good time. Yes.
I think it's amazing that Egypt imprisoned them. And then every time they got in trouble,
They will run.
they ran to the people who had held them hostage
Made no sense.
for over 400 and some years. That's amazing to me.
Well, it's a kind of a slave mentality. It's a slave mentality, and you see that every day. You know, you see that every day. You're enslaved to something, but you still think that the something that you were enslaved to has some type of ability, has some type of magic, something that you can use. We look to them like, okay, then, but they really got it going on. You know what I'm saying? They really got it going on. And so really, if I'm going to make it, if I'm going to make it, I need them,
Been dependent on them for so many years. And they still have a stronghold.
But then even when they were there and they wasn't treated right because they wanted to leave. And that's why I said, why do they keep running back there? You know, you've been delivered.
Yeah, it's your mentality.
It's the same way that I was saying earlier. You be delivered, you learn that it's grace.
Yeah.
But then you go back and you say, yeah, but so-and-so said that, well, I got to do this. You're running right back to what you've been escaped from, what you've been freed from. So
Yeah.
Of course, I've always said the Israelites, black race is closer to the Israelites as could be. Look at their history and look at our history.
It's your thinking. It's your thinking. Change your thinking, change your life. It's your thinking. It's the mentality that you have, and even with your you got to be willing to have your mentality tested, the way you think tested and changed.
The lady, I have a T-shirt that has that on it. Harriet Tubman with the Underground Railroad. She went and got slaves. She said, I freed 1,000 slaves. She said, I would have freed more if they had known they were slaves. And see, everybody's in an uproar about Kanye West because he said that slavery was voluntary and whatever, but they're missing really what he's saying. You can volunteer to be enslaved right now. And it don't have nothing to do with how much money you got, how big your house is. And the problem in church is that at least, I'm talking about saved people, I'm not talking about people just going to church. Probably 90-some% of the people that's saved, they don't esteem God's word. They esteem the church they go to. They esteem their pastor. That's a big thing now. My man of God. And nowhere in the Bible do you see that. Even Paul told them, you don't worship me. He said, who is Peter? Who am I? We ain't nothing but men who God blesses. One plant, the other water, but God give the increase. God give the increase. And so when you do not esteem what God says, then you cannot help but be in error. But we're big in church now about being nice to one another. Ooh, they so nice over there. But you're nicely ignorant. And Satan, and not only, all evil people take advantage of folks that's ignorant.
That's right.
That's true.
They do.
They do.
And I'll give you a good example. I run down there to the people down there on the corner to give me some tires because I just figured that those tires would be cheaper and it's a better deal and whatever. And we do that all the time. I see that we go over here in the corner and buy our stuff instead of going to the place where people really sell it at. You get better quality. It'll be at a cheaper price. I left him and went down there to a legitimate place and got some great tires for a third of the price. You're getting beat all the time. And so Satan takes advantage of the church because they don't esteem God's word. They esteem how beautiful the sanctuary is. They esteem their rules and their regulations, what we do, what we don't do. And my pastor got this degree and he does it. But see, God, thank you, Jesus.
And with that, we're going to end and pick up here next Sunday. Give the Lord a hand praise, everybody.